been involved in the industry for the last 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
So when my dad did the research with the CSIR, if I remember correctly, they trialed in the region of 18 different plant types, which they knew there was a ready market for those oils in the global market. So the first step was to plant out trials, see what grew in our area on our soils, establish that firstly we could produce an oil of a decent quality or a marketable quality, and then beyond that to see whether it would be viable to produce that oil. So we had assistants and people who were knowledgeable and had the equipment in order to establish, firstly, can we produce a quality product that we can put on the market? Of those 18, if I remember correctly, we came down to 5 different oils that we believed were both marketable and of a sufficient quality. I mean, were of a sufficient quality to be marketable, and that we could produce viably. So that was through oil analysis that determined the quality, and then we looked at the price and yield, and that determined the viability of planting those plants. Any person who's looking to venture into this type of business needs to be aware of that what you achieve in year one isn't necessarily what you're going to achieve in the long term. That's something unfortunate. Also, you obviously, as in any farming, there's seasonal variations in rainfall and temperatures, and all of those things play a role in your long-term yields and viability. So that's interesting. As your volumes increase, your price that you achieve actually decreases, because if you're selling 20 liters of oil, it's effectively a break bulk quantity, and you'll find someone's willing to pay a bit more for that quantity. But when you're starting to market tons of oil on the global market, then people become more price sensitive, because now you're marketing further down that value chain to the wholesalers rather than to manufacturers. So that was the other thing, is that the price that we were achieving, when we're selling the small quantities that we based our viability on, those prices came down dramatically as we produced more and more volume. In general, most plants like a nice, well-drained, sandy loam. But, when you're a farmer, you've got the soil you've got. There's nothing you can do about it. So, yes, you've got to look at the soils you've got and try and find a plant that suits your soil type. So soil type is one thing. The quality of what you've done with that soil is another. So when I look at soil quality, where I'm currently farming, I'm converting ex-sugarcane lands to essential oil production. Generally, those lands have been stripped of all their soil nutrients, so the quality is not great. That you can remedy through addition of humic matter, through addition of fertilizers, things like that. So that to me is not the big issue in terms of quality. It's more in terms of management, because you can regenerate your soils. You can look after your soils better. So your agronomic practices can determine your soil quality going forward. But what you can't really do is adjust your soil type. The soil type, if you've got clayey soils, you cannot change them to sandy soils. Those are the soils you've got. So I would say it's more about matching your crop that you grow with your soil type first, and making sure you're growing the right crop that matches your soil type, and then even more importantly, your climate. Making sure that you start with the right genetics. I myself have burnt my fingers with a lot of plant material. I've planted hectares of tea tree only to discover it's not the correct, doesn't produce the correct oil monograph, basically, and results in an oil that's not marketable. It was a very expensive lesson that we had to learn, but you mustn't think that a lavender is a geranium is a geranium. It is crucial that you understand that you're starting with the correct genetic plant material when you get into essential oils. In terms of determining that, I think you've got to speak to the supplier, make sure they're credible, make sure they understand, firstly, that it has to be the correct plant material, You need to ask them for some form of evidence displaying that these are in fact the correct genetics that you're receiving. At the moment, we're working on a number of new, not new, but they're new for us, essential oils that we haven't produced and marketed before. And there's certain plant types where we're going through maybe the 5th or 6th iteration of genetic material that we've bought in. We've planted trial lots. We've distilled small quantities. We've sent that oil away for analysis, and every time it's coming back with the wrong material. So we're spending a lot of money, but we're only planting sort of half-hectare blocks, and it's an expensive process, believe me. But we cannot. There's no ways we can establish a plantation and think that we're going to market that crop unless it is of the correct genetic material and produces the correct oil. For me, the yield, we farm our crop organically. Like I say, we take soil samples, and that from those soil samples, we get a recommendation of the nutrients that we need to apply to the land. So that will obviously have a direct impact on the yield. If you are applying the correct amount of fertilizer or nutrients, organic or conventional, depending on what you're doing, that is obviously one step in ensuring the correct or the desired yield for your crop. We aren't fortunate enough to be irrigating our crops. We rely on rainfall. So that's a big variable that's out of our control. And that obviously has a significant determination on our end yield. Obviously, if you were irrigating, you can have moisture probes and things like that that will inform you as to when you shouldn't irrigate. So that's in terms of the yield. That is what we look at. It's primarily keeping the crop free of competitive weeds and making sure we apply the correct nutrients to the plant. Then in terms of quality, I'm a firm believer that the major driver of quality is genetics. So I believe once you've determined you've got the correct genetics, that goes a long way to ensuring the continued good quality of your oil, making sure that composition is correct, and the major driver of that composition is genetics. In order to determine whether our oil quality is good, we take the norms that exist for various oils. In some cases, there might be ISOs that will say, well, this is the composition of what the oil should be. So a certain aroma compound, that chemical should be make up with a range. So let's say 25 to 30%. A good oil of that type should have between 25 and 30% of a certain compound. So we'll know that's what our oil's got to conform to in order to be able to market it. Once we've determined through our genetic selection that we've got the right oil and we produce the oil, we then send each batch of oil for GC-MS analysis, and that analysis comes back and we can see that whether it fits into the norms or not. Our buyers are becoming stricter, and the list of items we've got to comply with are ever growing. So that means there's a significant amount of documentation that travels with our product when we sell it, and a lot of that is various certificates and test results. So firstly, I think, we, as I said to you, we primarily are involved in organic production. So we have to have organic certification. That's an annual process, an annual inspection that gets done by an independent certification agency. And in our case, we certify our product to both the EU organic standards as well as the American National Organic Program. So that's the one thing. As I say, when we are supplying our customers, generally we supply them batch samples of the exact batch which we offer them. So the process we go through is we have our customers, our large wholesale customers or manufacturers, predominantly abroad, who we're in regular contact with them, and we'll have an idea of how much oil they want per shipment. We'll actually put aside that quantity of oil for for the customer. We will courier a sample to them, and they will analyze that sample themselves and place a purchase order based on that specific batch of oil. So we actually set it aside. We don't market one batch to multiple organizations. We actually set aside a batch, send it off for approval, and wait for the customer to either approve or decline that batch. In addition to that, at the same time as dispatching that sample to the customer, we dispatch a sample to one of a few labs that we work with. We work with one locally, we work with another in France, where we'll send that oil off for GC analysis to analyze the chemical properties of that oil, again, to ensure that it meets the norms. And some of our customers have their own set of norms that they are purchasing according to. So we have to make sure that it complies with that. Then beyond that, there are various quality standards that our customers are requiring us to have more and more. We are working on a number of those things like so quality management systems, even food safety, even though our products don't generally make their way into food. The companies that we are buying from do work in food, so they're insisting now that we have our own food safety standards and certification to that. So there's a lot that we have to do. A further one, we look at various contaminants. So in this we do more on a sort of sample basis, not necessarily with each batch of oil going on, but we do tests for phthalate contamination. We do pesticide residue analysis, and that's not just on organic. So through our co-op that I'm involved in, we sell both organic and conventional oils, and pesticide residue analysis is something that we do regular tests on, and we do that both on organic and conventional production. People mustn't think just because you're producing conventionally that it's all right to have pesticide residues in your product. It's certainly not, and buyers won't tolerate it. So that's another type of testing that we get done. In the actual distillation process, a big consideration is the temperature that you're processing on. Essential oils are volatile chemicals, and as such, there are certain of the components of that oil that can be burnt off if you process at too high a temperature. Primarily temperature and the volume of steam that we're using are the two parameters that we monitor in our distillation process. Buyers are becoming more and more discerning and more demanding in terms of what they need when supplying a good. So, what we found is that it was necessary that we club together as a group of people and work together because of how onerous the actual supply chain was becoming. So my thinking was it would be a whole lot easier if I could work with a group of like-minded farmers producing the same commodity as me, pool our efforts, and not all having to be trying to have one person marketing our oil and being able to undergo all these certifications and use our economy of scales, because also these things are very expensive, these certifications. And through pooling our resources, we are now able to meet the demands of our customers. The essential oils have been good to me. I've been fortunate that I was started in the industry quite early. I think there will always be headwinds of various headwinds that come in any type of business. And I think that people must always remember that that essential oil production is agriculture at the end of the day. And agriculture is very challenging, no matter what field you're in. Essential oils, I think, throws a few more challenges because it's a bit more niche. It's been rewarding to me, but it remains challenging. Thanks. Keep up.